cast with Sam once.
Sounds great.
He made me shit my pants. Talking about AI, I realized, like, oh, well, this is a genie that once it's out of the bottle, you're never getting it back in.
That's true.
There was a video that you tweeted about one of those Boston Dynamic robots. And you're like, in the future, it'll be moving so fast you can't see it without a strobe light.
Yeah. You could probably do that right now.
My previous company was D-Wave. I'll just show you a couple things. We built what are still the world's only quantum computers that you can buy. And the company, D-Wave, has been doing this. Thanks. I didn't really have much to do with it, but you know, so this is one of them. This is one of the processors. And a lot of interesting things happened to me over the years there. I got sent pajamas, a whole bunch of stuff. You know, there's lots of interesting things that happen when you build something like a quantum computer. But just as an aside, because I thought it was funny, one of the interesting things that's happened from the D-Wave story is there's this gigantic conspiracy that's arisen on the internet that goes like this. So D-Wave builds quantum computers. The way that they work, if you know how this works, is one of the interpretations is that you tap into these parallel universes and they do computations. Sounds really weird. But what's happened is this idea has been hijacked to describe something called the Mandela effect, which is this thing where the past changes. So think about something you know to be true from the past. And then imagine you went out on the internet and you can't find it at all. It's not there. It doesn't match with your experience. So these people think that D-Wave is responsible, and CERN. And
I want to tell you about the universe. What it is, how it came to be, what its building blocks are. I want to tell you how the future creates the past, which then creates the future.
But first, I want to tell you about crystals. You might be surprised to know that a crystal isn't an expensive piece of glass or a chandelier in some fancy dining room. The word crystal simply means a pattern that is periodic.
Look at this checkerboard pattern. See how it continues to spread out infinitely in each direction? That means it's a periodic pattern. So that's a two-dimensional crystal. This is another two-dimensional crystal. And this is another. You can also have three-dimensional crystals.
By the way, this 3D glass is called crystal because its atoms are actually arranged in a crystalline pattern. So, see how I'm projecting this three-dimensional crystal to a two-dimensional image on the sand? See how the 2D projection looks distorted because of the angle of the projection? That 2D image also has a pattern, but it isn't periodic. So, it's not a crystal. But there's a deep connection between the 2D object on the sand and the 3D mother crystal. This distorted 2D pattern is called a quasi-crystal. A quasi-crystal in a certain dimension, in this case 2D, is a projection of a crystal in a higher dimension, in this case 3D. A group of physicists in Los Angeles is working on a new physics theory where a particular 8D crystal, yep, that's right, an 8-dimensional crystal, is projected to 4D at a very particular angle, which forms a 4D quasi-crystal. And from this 4D quasi-crystal, they derive a 3D quasi-crystal, which they believe is the fundamental substructure of all of reality. This 3D quasi-crystal has a fundamental building block, a tetrahedron, which is a three-dimensional equilateral triangle. The size of each edge on this shape is the smallest possible length that can exist. This is called the Planck length. It's 10 to the 35 times smaller than a meter. So you know how your TV screen is broken down into building blocks called pixels? A pixel is the smallest possible indivisible unit of the 2D screen. So think of reality as your TV screen, but in 3D. And think of the tetrahedron as a 3D pixel, the smallest possible indivisible unit of reality. The tetrahedra in the quasi-crystal combine with other tetrahedra, using complex mathematical rules, to fill up all of the space in the universe. Each tetrahedron only has a few specific states in which it can exist at any given moment.
To the human eye. I mean, if I place my finger here, in terms of my depth perception, that's as if I'm touching its nose, and yet I can move that far back into it. There's nothing there, and yet it appears to be that I could literally actually stroke it. You know, there's no denying that there's real three-dimensionality there. This is a particularly good one because it's got these big gnashers, and if I try to move it a little closer to get you a real good look inside the mouth here, you can see very, very clearly, if you look at the teeth in relation to the tongue behind it, there's genuine movement here. You are actually getting to see behind things. Yeah, so that's the wonders of the hologram. And yet there it is. It's in a completely two-dimensional space. It doesn't really exist, even though my eyes tell me that it does exist.
I'd like you to see a few examples of just how far we've come in our holographic technology over the past few years, and how real holograms that we produce today are beginning to look. The first example is from 2007. It is part of an international conference being held by the company called Cisco. The man on the left is at the conference center in Bangalore, India. The two men on the right are on stage in India as holograms, but they are actually in San Jose, California.
So at this time, I'd like to beam up Martin De Beers and Chuck Stuckey back from San Jose. Martin, I'm beaming you up now with my spatial controls. How are you doing? Hey, Chuck, how you doing?
John, we're doing great, thank you.
Hey, John.
Hey, guys. You know, yesterday, Martin, you looked a little bit bigger than me. I hope today we're going to play with some sizes and we'll kind of give the audience an idea how we can make variations on that.
I believe so, John. I'll tell you, it's been a long day here in California. You know, we were up here at 3 a.m. our time. We're still wearing the same shirts, and we had a 5.6
50. Built for the... And move it at right angles to itself and equal length. That makes a square. Move that square in equal length at right angles to itself, and you have a cube. Now, this cube...
them do it goes, wow, I wonder if this is like the precursor. Just sort of like if you look at that phone that Gordon Gekko had on the beach,
yes,
and then you compare
big
that,
cell phone.
Yeah, you compare that to like a Galaxy Note 9.
Sure.
Like how the fuck did that become that, right? And I wonder when I see this HTC Vive, I'm like, what is that thing going to be 10 years from now when we're making fun of what it is now? What is it? How ingrained and how connected and interconnected is this technology going to be in our life?
It will be, at some point, indistinguishable from reality.
Where we'll lose this. We'll lose this. Like you and I are just looking at each other through our eyes. I see you, you see me. I hope.
You think so?
I think you probably have regular eyes.
This could be some simulation.
It could. Do you entertain that?
Well, the argument for the simulation, I think, is quite strong, because if you assume any improvement at all over time, any improvement, 1%, 0.1%, just extend the time frame, make it 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years. The universe is 13.8 billion years old. What would civilization, if you count it, if you're very generous, civilization is maybe 7,000 or 8,000 years old, if you count it from the first writing. This is nothing. This is nothing. So if you assume any rate of improvement at all, then games will be indistinguishable from reality. Or civilization will end. One of those two things will occur. Therefore, we are most likely in a simulation.
Or we're on
'Cause
our
we
way
exist.
to one, right? Well, but just
Since we
because we
exist,
exist, we could most certainly be on the road. We could be on the road to that, right? It doesn't mean that it has to have
We could
already
be in base
happened.
reality. We could be in base reality.
We could be here now on our way to the road or on our way to the destination where this can never happen again, where we are completely ingrained in some sort of an artificial technology or some sort of a symbiotic relationship with the internet or the next level of sharing information. But right now we're not there yet. That's possible too, right? It's possible that a simulation is one day going to be inevitable, that we're going to have something that's indistinguishable from regular reality. But maybe we're not there yet. That's also possible. That we're not
Yes,
quite
it
there
is.
yet. That this is real. When I touch that
It feels
wood,
very real.
maybe that's why everybody's like into like mason jars and shit.
Mason jars.
Suede shoes. People are into like craft restaurants and they want raw wood. Everyone wants to see metal. People.
So I'm going to talk about aliens. But before I do that, we had a little bit of interesting news today. I'm going to talk about aliens. But before I do that, we had a little bit of interesting news today.
And the discipline of particle theory. So two guys, Jim Simons, the world's most successful hedge fund manager, and C.N. Yang, a person who might arguably be the world's first or second greatest living theoretical physicist.
Are you a proponent of the multi-universes theory? Do you believe that there are many, many universes, and that even if this one fades out, that there's other ones that are starting fresh right now, and there's an infinite number of them, and they're just constantly in this never-ending cycle of birth and death?
I think most likely, this is just about probability, there are many, many simulations. These simulations are, we might as well call them reality, or you could call them multiverse.
These simulations, you believe, are created? Like someone has manufactured?
They're running on a substrate.
So...
That substrate is probably boring.
Boring?
Mm-hmm.
How so?
Well, when we create a simulation, like a game or a movie, it's a distillation of what's interesting about life. You know, like it can take a year to shoot an action movie. And then that's all distilled down into 2 or 3 hours. So, let me tell you, if you see an action movie being filmed, it's boring. Super boring. There's like lots of takes, everything's in a green screen. Looks pretty goofy, doesn't look cool. But once you add the CGI and have great editing, it's amazing. So, I think most likely, if we're a simulation, it's really boring outside the simulation. Because why would you make a simulation that's boring? You'd make the simulation way more interesting than base reality.
That is, if this right now is a simulation.
Yes.
And ultimately, inevitably, as long as we don't die or get hit by a meteor, we're going to create some sort of simulation if we continue on the same technological path we're on right now.
Yes.
But we might not be there yet. So it might not be a simulation here. But it most likely is, you feel, other places.
This notion of place or where is a
flawed.
Yes.
Flawed
like
perception.
Where, like
right.
that, if you have this sort of Vive, you know, that's made by Valve and Steam and it's really Valve that made it. HTC did the hardware, but it's really a Valve thing.
Makers of Half-Life.
Yes. Valve, great company.
Great company.
when you're in that virtual reality, which is only going to get better, where are you? Where are you really?
Right.
You aren't anywhere.
Well, whereas
You're in the computer.
What defines where you are?
Exactly.
Right.
It's your perception.
Is it your perceptions, or is it a scale that we have under your butt? You're
What
right here. I've measured you. You're the same weight as you were when you left. But meanwhile, your experience is
Why do you
radically
think
different.
you're where you are right now? You might not be.
I'll spark up a joint if you keep talking. Your manager's going to come in here. We might have to lock the door.
Right now, you think you're in a studio in LA.
That's what I heard.
You might be in a computer.
Oh, listen, man. I think about this all the time. Yeah, I mean, it's unquestionable that one day that'll be the case, as long as we keep going, as long as nothing interrupts us, and if we start from scratch, and we're single-celled organisms all over again, and then millions and millions of years later we become the next thing that is us, with creativity and the ability to change its environment. It's going to keep monkeying with things until it figures out a way to change reality, to almost like punch a hole through what is this thing into what it wants it to be, and create new things. And then those new things will intersect with other people's new things, and then it'll be this ultimate pathway of infinite ideas and expression, all through technology.
Metal boxes, about 10 feet on a side, 12 feet tall. And they are powered, they have a fridge inside them, a refrigerator that cools these chips to almost absolute zero. Just a wisp, a fraction of a degree above absolute zero. Hundreds of times colder than interstellar space.
The human being brings that local flair of Oregon to other communities outside of the state. The coffee culture in Portland is unique. Our customers are looking for a high-quality cup of coffee. To serve hundreds of customers a day, we need a fast service provider. We use Comcast Business at all of our locations. Comcast Business has proven themselves to us in providing us with uninterrupted service.
Amongst the coldest and most isolated and extreme conditions that humans have ever been able to engineer. These fridges, interestingly enough, which are called pulse tube dilution refrigerators, have a thing called a pulse tube, which emits a sound roughly once per second, which sounds eerily like a heartbeat. Chip about the size of your thumbnail. And on this chip, at the heart of this big box is a tiny chip about the size of your thumbnail. And on this chip resides all of the wonder and magic that makes this thing go. I'm not going to describe in any mathematical detail how it all works, but let me give you an analogy. In quantum mechanics, there's this concept that a thing can exist in two states which are mutually exclusive at the same time, quote unquote. So I'm using those words because the English language was developed before we had concepts to describe what these things actually are doing. But I'm going to give you a roundabout way of understanding this. Imagine that there really are parallel universes out there, and now imagine you have two that are exactly identical in every respect, all the way out to the horizon as far as we can see, down to the last little atomic detail of every single thing, with only one difference. And that's the value of a little thing called a qubit on this chip, which is a contraction of quantum bit. And that qubit is very much like a bit or a transistor in a conventional computer. It has two distinct physical states, which we call 0 and 1 for bit. In a conventional computer, these are mutually exclusive. That device is either one or the other and never anything else. In a quantum computer, that device can be in this strange situation where these two parallel universes have a nexus, a point in space where they overlap. And when you increase the number of these devices, every time you add one of these qubits, you double the number of these parallel universes that you have access to. until such time when you get to a chip like this, which is about 500 of these bits, you have something like 2 to the 500th power of these guys living in that chip. So the way I think about it is that the shadows of these parallel worlds overlap with ours. And if we're smart enough, we can dive into them and grab their resources and pull them back into ours to make an effect in our world. Now, this may sound very odd to you and bizarre, and in fact, I am using language that a normal theoretical physicist probably wouldn't use, but this is, what I'm telling you is absolutely correct and in line with the way that these things actually work. We've been doing this for some time now, and in fact, we have our own version of Moore's Law. The doubling of the number of these qubits on the chip has happened once a year for the past 9 years, almost 500,000. This is the kind of progress that you're going to see with these types of... All right, so now I'm getting into the last part of my talk where I'm going to make some predictions, some dangerous predictions. So predictions are very dangerous for a variety of reasons. And of course, the quantum key to the abyss factors into it somehow. I'm not exactly sure how. Okay, so that's just D-Wave. I did that for about 15 years. It was a lot of fun. A big science project that we turned into a commercial entity. That was a warm-up for Kindred. So Kindred is much, much, much more ambitious than D-Wave. And what Kindred is trying
shiny and new.